At the current moment in time, the entire team was at the new factory that my father had set up for us, which is where we had begun going about our work, getting everything ready. My new motorcycle had recently been completed with all of the new upgrades that I requested in the design. Honestly, with me and Titan working on it together, it didn't take long. It was honestly a snap to design this thing. We found that myself and Titan most especially, now had the ability to calculate and quantify information like nobody's business, drawing even advanced blueprints in our heads and on demand. And all that was really required was that we absorb the necessary information to know that it could be done. So basically, if I knew any sort of technology existed, then it's easy for me to create any sort of item or a blueprint for it inside of my head. Something like this takes me a minute or so to really work out. Titan, on the other hand, can draw even the most advanced blueprints up in seconds. We tested it, in fact, and found that in 10 seconds, Titan could computate, calculate, redesign, and reformat 10 different variants of XPC, one per second, each with its own unique design, function, and purpose, assortment of individual and unique weaponry and capabilities. She had recently been outfitted with 2 fully customized XPCs, designed specifically to basically work for her, like little servants or henchmen, except they were anything but little. In fact, they were even more dangerous than the regular XPCs, by a fairly wide margin. While I was looking over the new bike, she was doing somewhat of a show tune performance, playing music in the background, whilst singing, her XPCs doing a jaunty dance in the background, which was both hilarious and sort of terrifying. I was checking over my new weaponry, and the motorcycle in general. I had included, once again, another military-grade signal receptor into the motorcycle. Titan was now able to wirelessly communicate and control any sort of electronic device, even many of them at the same time, which was how she was getting those XPCs to do that little show tune. For her, getting them to move around and do exactly what she wants, even while controlling her own movement, having conversations, was basically no trouble at all. If she wanted to, she could control hundreds of them, her own little XPC army. So running my motorcycle as well was basically no trouble at all. The motorcycle itself had some unique upgrades specifically for me, primarily nanotech upgrades. I had had large reservoirs installed into the body of the motorcycle that were able to pressurize things in a liquid format. Basically, they were nanite canisters. This allowed me to carry more nanites than I would normally be able to within my own body. I simply produced them and then have them make their way into the motorcycle, absorbing into the canisters, and at this point I had managed to fill basically all of them. My nanites were actually particularly useful when interacting with other machinery. I could even repair damage to machinery, so my motorcycle was basically next to invincible. Even if someone managed to damage it, I could just fix it, right there on the spot. Other than the nanites, most of the weaponry remained the same. I didn't really see any need in changing any of that out. At the moment, I was awaiting a visit from Lilith, who wasn't there when I had my impromptu meeting with the Believer. Honestly, when we filled her in on the situation, she obviously didn't really believe it, and it took a very large sum of convincing. During the 3 days in which I disappeared, while everyone else just sat around worrying, Lilith, well, she was Lilith. Waiting wasn't her specialty. So she put feet to the street and started looking. She's a snoop, so she did what snoops do. She snooped around, focusing primarily on Alexander, beginning to track his movements and activities. She was, of course, overjoyed and relieved when I showed back up, but decided to keep her eyes on Alexander for the time being. And according to her, some very interesting things were going on. As of late, Alexander has started to liquidate large amounts of his assets in other companies, selling off stocks like they were hotcakes, and refunneling all of those assets into his primary company, Xander Tech. Xander Tech was primarily a computer company, focused on making high-grade computer assets, processors, microchips, and other advanced technologies. Biotech, of course, did the same, but current nanite technology wasn't a perfect fix for every problem. There are some things that regular technology is simply better for, at least if you don't have my nanites, which we weren't exactly in a hurry to start spreading around. Regardless, Alexander's movements consisted of more than just selling off stocks and investing in his primary company. No, according to Lilith, he had been doing a great number of things very rapidly. We weren't sure whether it was a response to what we were doing or not, or whether this was all part of some plan that Alexander put together. But we had noted that large-scale shipments of goods and materials that were being kept very hush-hush were being filtered into his company, all with military-grade security. And there were no machines or cameras to hack. They weren't using any XPCs, which was typical for many military-grade shipments within Newgate City. In fact, at this point, it was almost unheard of to do it without them. The only reason you wouldn't is because you don't want any biotech technology around to witness what you're doing. Instead, Alexander seemed to be hiring swaths of private security soldiers, mercenaries, and everything else. And he had next to monopolized all non-automatic and automated military forces within the city, paying them in droves, hundreds. On top of that, he was having very hush-hushed business deals, meeting with large amounts of other companies. After doing some digging, Lilith managed to find out that they were all having these meetings for some massive project that Alexander was working on, and all of them had signed gag orders, and no one was breaking them. Not to mention, whatever was happening in these meetings was causing serious changes in the business world. All of these companies were investing major amounts of assets into Xander Tech. The number of zeros is staggering. It was at that point that the door to the factory opened up, and my father, along with Lilith, entered the factory floor as Titan was just finishing her show tune. However, neither Lilith nor my father had a very pleasant expression. They both looked very concerned. Glad to see you showed up. A little later than I thought. So, what's going on? I asked as they began to approach me. To be honest, nothing good, Lilith replied. I don't know what Alexander is up to, but whatever it is, it's huge. And we just got the biggest bomb dropped today. I'll let your father explain it, she said, turning towards my dad. Well, today we had a board meeting for all of the biotech primary stockholders, of which Alexander, of course, showed up. However, it wasn't a normal appearance by any measure. He showed up for one reason and one reason only: to inform us that he was liquidating all of his stocks in biotech. A fortune's worth. He sold all of them off, announced that he was leaving the corporation, and did so with a smile on his face. This, of course, was shocking. After everything that he had done to try to seize control of biotech, to simply sell all of his holdings, it didn't make any sense. Shortly after which, we received notice. Alexander has called a press conference. It's scheduled for today, and basically every news station in the city is going to be covering it. In fact, it's just about to start, my father said, pulling a holographic projector from his pocket, walking and setting it down on a table as the holographic screen lit up.